Parshas Nitzavim VaYelech bring us to the close of the life of Moshe Rabbeinu, the greatest leader that Klal Yisrael ever had. And we're told that after Moshe Rabbeinu saw fit to enter the entirety of the community of Klal Yisrael within the new bris, to adhere to all the principles given to them by Hashem Yisbarach, we're informed that Moshe Rabbeinu turned to the Bnei Levi and he instructed them, Lakach es Sefer HaTorah Hazeh, to take the Sefer Torah that he had written, from Bereshis all the way up until the conclusion of the Torah itself, or the last 8 psukim describing his death. V'samtem oso mitzad aron bris Adonai Elohechem v'aya sham b'chol ha'ed. And that Sefer Torah should be placed either at the side, literally the side of the aron that housed the Luchos HaBris, the 10 Commandments, and there was somewhat of a ledge right outside it, says the Gemara Bava Basra, or it refers to the fact that that the Sefer Torah was to be placed inside the aron itself, adjacent to the Luchos HaBris, to the Decalogue that was found therein. And what was the purpose for this placement? V'haya sham b'chol ha'ed, so that it forever serve as a testimony. A testimony for what? Explains the Sfarno, Moshe Rabbeinu knew well, as we see in the psukim, that ultimately Klal Yisrael would veer off the straight and narrow path of the Derech HaYashar, engage in Avodah Zarah, and therefore Moshe Rabbeinu saw fit to take this unaltered Sefer Torah, this perfect Sefer Torah, place it inside or immediately adjacent outside the Aron, in order that what? V'yo'ed zeh ha-sefer shekol ma sheyimtza kosav b'sefer ha-Torah sheyimtzeu b'yad tzadikei hadar hein advarim shenemru lo l'Moshe misinai b'lito sefes v'chisaron. So that there would be one authentic, indisputable copy of the Sefer Torah found within the possession of the Kohanim, the Bnei Levi, and that could be used for purposes of comparison to any other Sefer Torah that would be found within the hands of the Tzadikei Hadar, to authenticate in turn what they had in their possession and what they were teaching Klal Yisrael. So should anyone arise and say, this stuff is being dreamt up, it's being fabricated by the people who are teaching it, they would be able to go to the source, take out that singular copy that was heralded as being unaltered, undiluted, unchanged in form, and that copy would forever serve as an aid, as a testimony to the eternity of what was written there, to the eternity of its application. But I think there's something else perhaps that could be suggested here, and that is, v'haya sham b'chol ha'ed, that it should be as a testimony to what? A testimony to the actual life being of the Sefer Torah and the Aseres HaDibros themselves. Meaning this: the Torah Akdosha is presented to Klal Yisrael through Moshe Rabbeinu, and there's a myriad of halachos, the Taryag mitzvos, all the Rabbanans, all of that which we refer to as things that were given down, halacha l'Moshe Sinai, to Moshe Rabbeinu by Matan Torah itself, the entire corpus of everything that we ultimately will receive. But we should know that it's not a simple set of laws. It's not a simple set of decrees that we can easily embrace and easily live up to without any kind of ups and downs within life itself. That's not the case at all. Because if we look at the Aseres HaDibros found within the Aron, that was found within the Mishkan and within the Kodesh HaKadoshim, we see the Shnei Luchos HaBris, Aseres HaDibros, only 10 commandments. But we understand that there's a history, and history has shown us that Avram Avinu had 2 children, Yishmael and a Yitzchak. And Yitzchak had an Esav and a Yaakov. And Yaakov had the Shiftei Kah, the 12 tribes. And not all of them engaged in the very same kibbut of aim that's mentioned in the Luchos HaBris on the right-hand side as the 5th commandment. Kibbut of aim is not an easy thing to hearken to necessarily at each and every turn within our lives. And believing in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we see historically, was not always easy, as it were, for every member of Klal Yisrael, given the travails that befell them and the nuances and the allures of society. and everything that is found insofar as Shabbos Kodesh, insofar as testimony, insofar as Lo Sirtzach. We have the entire history of Klal Yisrael that shares with us the great challenges of leadership within Klal Yisrael that indeed came the way of Moshe Rabbeinu, the Dasan and Avirams and the Korachs. And we had the Znus of Zimri ben Solo and Cosbi Basur, and the necessity of Pinchas to arise spear in hand in order to defend the Torah Dosha given to us by Kodesh Baruch Hu. We have an entire history, and when we learn through the history of the Chamisha Chumshei Torah, ultimately continued within the Nevi'im, Rishonim, and Achronim, and Ksuvim, we see that the living entity of the Aseres HaDibros to be found within the Aron itself has adjacent to it, within the actual box, the middle box they're in, or what? Or adjacent on the outside, the full life story of not the corpus of law, but the challenges to be found within living up to them, and within creating for ourselves a meaningful life in our Avodas Hashem by striving hard and fast to cling to the mitzvos, all presented to us through thick and thin, through this desert, through the entry into Eretz Yisrael, through our banishment from Eretz Yisrael. Everything incorporated into this what? Into this aid that shows us that it's not a simple journey, and it's not a simple path of Avodas Hashem, but it's a meaningful one, and it's one that can be accomplished and can be facilitated no matter where we live, no matter what times we live in, no matter what society we find ourselves part of, no matter what challenges face us. V'samtem oso mitzad Aron bris Adonai Elohechem v'hoya sham b'chol le'eid, to teach you the promise, says Moshe Rabbeinu, that everything that I have taught you per the instruction of God is doable. Lo b'shamayim hi, and it's not me'ever layom, but it's realizable, functional, and achievable by each and every one of us. Have a wonderful Shabbos.